A wrestling promotion that was honestly and truthfully so geographically isolated, yet its influence was felt far, far, far beyond its oceanic borders. I'm John Rectum with my review of Tales from the Territories, Polynesian Wrestling's Island Dynasty. This episode was really fascinating to me because while some historians have dived into Hawaiian/Polynesian Pacific Pro Wrestling from the native towns to the various outside talents that came in, either coming to or going from Japan or just going there for spots, and the influence that Polynesian Pacific Pro Wrestling had on the wrestling business, and the fact that the Maivia, influence still continues to this day, with Rock the Dwayne Johnson being the biggest box office movie star in the world. My goodness, I really just hope, and I know I've said this with other episodes with Stampede and others, and especially Florida, because there's so much more to tell with Florida. I really hope they shot extra footage, they did more reenactments, they can do director's cuts, or maybe even a second season and tell more stories, because this is really fascinating shit. So, the panel, such as it is, Rocky Iukea, Kevin Sullivan, Bruno Lara, aka Harvey Whippleman, and Lars Anderson. Anderson, that's me. If you're an MST3K fan, you might get a kick out of that. If you're not an MST3K fan, you probably have no idea why I said that. So, Polynesian Pacific Pro Wrestling. Again, very geographically isolated. And you think about Hawaii, and it's a beautiful place to live from what I'm told. Beautiful place to take a vacation, at least it used to be. I think now I think there's some strife going on over there, but that's another story for another day. But it had a great history as far as professional wrestling goes, because you think about how tough the Tongans, American Samoans are. Like talents like Jimmy Snuka, Don Morocco, so many others. I mean, Snuka got mentioned a little bit here, but so many talents that were based out of Hawaii or made their home in Hawaii. I mean, just a lot of great stuff to dive into here. And even though it was, it's really hard to explain as somebody that doesn't live over there. And I mean, I'm sure people that were around during the heyday, or maybe people that live in Hawaii that have studied up on this probably could explain it better. But there is just such a great, just deep history to dive into that, again, I really hope they have more footage here. Guys would go to Japan, they would stop over, and they would have to fuel up again, and they would stop and have shows in Honolulu, and Honolulu, big, metropolitan area there. Guys like the original Sheik, Dusty, Andre, so many others are there. The very popular Magnum TA. They showed a little bit of that. King Curtis Iukea, Sullivan, my son. Yes, that guy that was there on WCW television in the very early days of Nitro, that brought out the Yeti. He was a big deal in Hawaii. Very big deal. And obviously Rocky Iukea, his son. And Peter Maivia, he was seen, he was revered, true high chief. His wife, Leah. This was great to see, because so much of this old footage, I really wish that somebody had a better master tape of a hot summer night at Aloha Stadium, because I'd like to see just how well that thing came across. Because I think there's one full edition of it on YouTube. It's got such bad audio you can't possibly watch it. Rock continues to carry on the Maivia legacy. Peter was nice but tough. Got in a fight with Billy Robinson in a restaurant, and that's why Billy Robinson had that eye, because he said, "Why are you eating with your hands? Why not eat with a fork, you heathen?" You really don't want to insult the Hawaiians or the Samoans or any of that stuff. You really don't, especially when you're in their when you're being brought in as their guest. Be their guest. Don't insult how they eat with their chest. No, that is not how that works. And then King Curtis and Prince Maiava, I think is how it's said. If I mispronounce any of these names, I do apologize. He's talking about, Rocky's recalling this thing where they did this deal where he was going to do this this flying headbutt into the corner. Puckle was going to be pulled down. He was going to gig himself, cut himself, and then Curtis was going to sneak him an Alka-Seltzer, so it's like he's bleeding, he's foaming at the mouth, he's all this. And people were ready to ride, and people were ready to come down. Like, there were plenty of cops, but people were ready. There weren't enough cops. A cop got hit with a piece of concrete. All this crazy shit's happening. Peter Maivia had to come out and basically stop, like, no, we will handle this. What you're doing is wrong. We, like, you're gonna do something you shouldn't do. I will handle this. And the fact that he was so goddamn revered, they calmed down, but a cop got hit with a piece of concrete. It was very, very scary. And then they talk about how Peter Maivia died at the age of 45. I wish they dived into him a little bit more. But that was a great thing about how, the natives are getting restless. Leave with your heat. Ernie Ladd and Ox Baker. And then Leah Maivia was left in charge, Aunt Rock's grandmother. And Lars Anderson got brought in as her booker and right-hand man. There's always been stories about Lars Anderson maybe being a noted piece of shit, but it seems like either he maybe wasn't the best booker, or maybe he was just made to be a bit of a harsh individual because of certain things that happened that I'll talk about a little bit later. There was Malatoa, I think is how it's said. He was a Samoan king. That's where Leia's lineage goes back to. And evil foreigners were used by Leia to, wrestle the natives and everything. She even had Kevin Sullivan that was going to a show on an American Samoa to face Siva Afi. I hope I pronounced that right. And he was a champion. He says, "You're going to beat him." And he's looking around at all these people that are pissed off. He's like, "No, I'm not. I'm not going to do this." So he pulls his own screw job and screws himself. Gross. And has Siva cover him and tells the ref, "Count or I'll kill you." And he does. And he's like, "Nope, I'm not winning the title here because I don't want to die." And that was pretty funny. And then, and Kevin Sullivan, look, I mean, yeah, the guy's a bit of a creep. And the guy, they never really mentioned how the guy abused Nancy as well. Just saying that. That kind of always gets pushed to the side. Not saying, but the whole point is I'm not saying Kevin Sullivan doesn't have his demons. He has a hell of a mind for the wrestling business. I will say that. Summer of 85, promotion was doing well. A hot summer night in Aloha Stadium. A load supercard. Andre was even on there. And when Andre was working basically exclusively for Vince, except he was working in Japan as well. Egos are getting in the way because various other promoters were brought in. Crockett and Vince was going to try to run shows there. Crockett had run shows, or was going to start running shows there. Florida had planned to try and run shows there, even though when you think about Florida, you can understand Vince, you can understand Crockett. Florida in the summer of 85, after Eddie Graham had taken his own life in January of 85, when they were on their ass, probably not the best idea. Lars Anderson talks about becoming the booker. He worked in AWA, Florida and such. He was up in Winnipeg, and then got told, Leah Maivia, after her husband dies, looking for a booker. Okay, where's the phone? Goes over there. But then there were others in the company, stockholders in the company, that were basically trying to get him out because he wasn't, a native. And they beat him up in the parking lot. He nearly died, was choking on his own tongue. Had to stand or sit across the table from guys that just were trying to kill him. And then he basically there's a thing, Dumar, I forget the guy's last name. It was, started with a W. They're talking, they talk about him, how he wanted to run opposition to Leah Maivia. Well, all this stuff's going on after they draw 22,000 people at Aloha Stadium. And then basically they said, well, you need to pay us a booking fee. He didn't know what a booking fee was. It's basically like, example, you have a world-class championship wrestling town that would be booked over in Houston for Paul Bosch. Paul Bosch would pay a booking fee for bringing that out and bringing the talent over to do the show. He'd pay like a percentage of the house, a couple grand, whatever it was, whatever was drawn on the house. 50 grand. Okay, here's $3,000-$4,000, something like that. The commentator, now turned opposition promoter, running his own deal, didn't want to do that. And then basically, people told him, well, and I think Lars even said, like, the quote was, "You're going to get your balls cut off if you don't play nice." Well, he took this personally as a threat, got the FBI involved. He wore a wire, meeting with Lars and Leia, and then money was exchanged, and then they were arrested, put on trial, 13 weeks of a trial. Gordon Soley was mentioned because I guess, he's part of the Florida office and also the commentator. A lot of this got a little messy. And then Bob Geigel even had to explain what a booking fee was, which actually helped the case swing in the favor of Leia and Lars Anderson. The verdict was not guilty, but Leah Maivia was not an American citizen, so she was deported back to American Samoa, which is not part of, by the way, the U.S., just in case anybody failed geography. And that in addition to other stuff, the lawsuits and all that, led to the fall of Polynesian pro wrestling quicker than it would have. It might have gone into the early 90s. I don't know how much longer it would have gone, because and I'm not knocking, but if the best you can do is draw 22,000 people at your hottest in Aloha Stadium, which is probably which was a big deal, and then by, I think, next year, it was 86, I believe, they drew 1,900 people in a stadium. Yeah, probably wasn't going to work out. King Curtis Iaukea, Rocky tells the story. Rocky Iaukea, not Rocky Johnson. Fuck Rocky Johnson, by the way. I'll get to him in a minute. He operated on the beach but didn't have a permit. He was selling stuff just trying to make money. And police showed up. They were like, well, look, we respect you. Your grandfather was a police officer. We don't want to arrest you, but we got the people are getting upset about this. And then he did this whole thing where he had a cameraman hidden, a news cameraman, and he did this thing because there were surfboards and stuff. He did this deal where he tripped and he gigged himself, and it made it look like the police did it. And in that way, he was able to continue his business. Again, a little bit weird how they told the story, but and then we talk about the Maivia dynasty. We talk about, we talk about Peter and Leia already. Then we talk about Ata, Rock's mother, and Rocky Johnson. The guy that seemed to like underage girls quite a bit. There's stories out there about it. That's why I really hate when people say about Rocky Johnson, oh, he was a great guy, didn't have any of that. No. Wasn't a great father either to his dad. Or to his son, I mean. Might not have been a great father. Might not have been, a great father in general. His dad might have hated him too. I don't goddamn know. The whole point is he wasn't a great father to his son. You can see that on Rock's face. You can see it. I've only seen clips of young Rock, and Rocky Johnson, a bunch of stories about him. Bruno chimes in about how, he got his start in Hawaii, and then was talking about Memphis. Memphis in 87 was not necessarily on its ass. There were a few decent houses, but things were starting to end a little bit, as with every territory. Even though Memphis geographically still had a lot of fans with it, because they had Lawler, they had Jerry Jarrett, and they had other towns, Austin Idol and such. Rocky Johnson came back. Rocky Johnson had been a big star in Memphis in the late 70s, early 80s. I believe, if I remember my time correctly. If not, I do apologize. And Rocky said, hey, Bruno, my son should come live with you because I'm traveling a lot. Okay. So Rock's like 14, he's already 6'2". Bruno talks about and this is where Rock's influence gets brought in. They were traveling, or they were walking in a bad part of Nashville, and there was this really, really broken down car that this guy wanted to sell him for $400. Bruno handed him 40. Oh, that's good enough. They drive the car. There's a homeless guy in the back sleeping in the trash. Man, we just brought this car. Get the hell out. And then the car never started after that, so they were out $40, and they got to drive back to the hotel that they were staying at, that Bruno was staying at. And the car never started, and it got towed off eventually. And to think that is where that's where Rock the Dwayne Johnson, got his start. And then, after the football career went up, he had $7 in his pocket, and now he's the biggest box office attraction. Ata saw Bruno as a second son, always sends him texts, and that's nice. Found a Polynesian Pacific Pro Wrestling shirt for Rock the Dwayne Johnson. It's all stained, it's old, but he had it in a case on his wall, which is pretty goddamn cool. And I've been critical of Harvey Whippleman in the past, but you know what? He came across well here, and at least there were some good stories here. The legacy lives on, and it flamed out like a comet. It went up like a comet, came down like a comet, I believe, as Kevin Sullivan said. It meteoric thighs and spectacular balls. I think that's how that saying goes. Portland Wrestling is next week, but that'll be interesting. Now, that was a pretty good episode on Polynesian Pacific Pro Wrestling. So, anyway, agree, disagree with what I said, like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Retlin. I'll see you soon.